The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Chapter 1, The Story of the Door. Mr. Utterson, the lawyer, was a man of rugged countenance that was never lighted by a smile. Cold, scanty, and embarrassed in discourse, backward in sentiment, lean, long, dusty, dreary, and yet somehow lovable. At friendly meetings, and when the wine was to his taste, something eminently human beaconed from his eye, something indeed which never found its way into his talk, but which spoke not only in these silent symbols of the after-dinner face, but more often and loudly in the acts of his life. He was austere with himself, drank gin when he was alone, to mortify a taste for vintages, and though he enjoyed the theatre, had not crossed the doors of one for 20 years. But he had an approved tolerance for others, sometimes wondering, almost with envy, at the high pressure of spirits involved in their misdeeds, and in any extremity inclined to help rather than to reprove. I incline to Cain's heresy, he used to say quaintly. I let my brother go to the devil in his own way. In this character, it was frequently his fortune to be the last reputable acquaintance and the last good influence in the lives of downgoing men. And to such as these, so long as they came about his chambers, he never marked a shade of change in his demeanor. Here we are introduced to one of our main characters of the story, and that is Mr. Utterson. And Mr. Utterson is a lawyer living in Victorian England. And so if we're thinking Victorian England, we're thinking very prim, very proper. You kind of had to be perfect in society. And we have these people leading double lives behind closed doors because the pressure to be perfect just got to be too much for them. So here we have Mr. Utterson. Like I said, he is a lawyer and he lives his life in moderation. So he is kind of like this Victorian gentleman. However, he doesn't mind associating with people that are kind of going down a little bit of a darker path. He's not going to go down that path with them. But as he says, I incline to Cain's heresy. I let my brother go to the devil in his own way. So he's not really helping these people, but he's not hurting them either. He's kind of sitting back and just watching it happen, which can sometimes just be as bad as leading them down that path. And here we have a biblical allusion to Cain. This is from the Bible, Cain and Abel. Cain commits the first murder by killing his brother Abel out of jealousy. No doubt the feat was easy to Mr. Utterson, for he was undemonstrative at best, and even his friendships seemed to be founded in a similar catholicity of good nature. It is the mark of a modest man to accept his friendly circle ready-made from the hands of opportunity, and that was the lawyer's way. His friends were those of his own blood, or those whom he had known the longest. His affections, like ivy, were the growth of time. They implied no aptness in the object. Hence, no doubt, the bond that united him to Mr. Richard Enfield, his distant kinsman, the well-known man about town. It was a nut to crack for many, what these two could see in each other, or what subject they could find in common. It was reported by those who encountered them in their Sunday walks that they said nothing, looked singularly dull, and would hail with obvious relief the appearance of a friend. For all that, the two men put the greatest store by these excursions, counted them the chief jewel of each week, and not only set aside occasions of pleasure, but even resisted the calls of business, that they might enjoy them uninterrupted. We meet our second character of the book here, Mr. Richard Enfield. He is a distant relative of Utterson's, and it says that they go on these walks together every single Sunday. It's kind of like rain or shine, they're there together, and people look at them on these walks and they're like, that seems really boring. It's basically they're just walking in silence with each other, not talking. But both Utterson and Enfield really enjoy these walks together. Now it's going to start describing these streets that they walk down. And this is really where we're getting our first taste of one of our main themes of the book, which is duality. It chanced on one of these rambles that their way led them down a by-street in a busy quarter of London. The street was small and what is called quiet, but it drove a thriving trade on the weekdays. The inhabitants were all doing well, it seemed, and all enviously hoping to do better still, and laying out the surplus of their gains and coquetry, so that the shop fronts stood along that thoroughfare with an air of invitation, like rows of smiling saleswomen. Even on Sunday, when it veiled its more florid charms and lay comparatively empty of passage, the street shone out in contrast to its dingy neighborhood, like a fire in a forest, and with its freshly painted shutters, well-polished brasses, and general cleanliness and gaiety of note, instantly caught and pleased the eye of the passenger. So this first street that they walk down, it has like this very friendly atmosphere to it. It says it's busy, thriving trade, everyone's doing well, air of invitation, smiling saleswomen, florid charms. It's shown out, freshly painted, well polished, general cleanliness. So we have this street they're going down that's just this well-maintained street. You feel comfortable walking down the street, doing business on the street. Everyone seems to be happy. So that's one street they walk down. Then, two doors from one corner, on the left hand going east, the line was broken by the entry of a court. And just at that point, a certain sinister block of building thrust forward its gable on the street. It was 2 stories high, showed no window, nothing but a door on the lower story, and a blind forehead of discolored wall on the upper, and bore in every feature the marks of prolonged and sordid negligence. The door, which was equipped with neither bell nor knocker, was blistered and distained. Tramps slouched into the recess and struck matches on the panels. Children kept shop upon the steps. The schoolboy had tried his knife on the moldings, and for close on a generation no one had appeared to drive away these random visitors or to repair their ravages. So you turn the corner a little bit from this like very friendly and bustling street, and you have this sharp contrast here. It says you had this sinister block of building. There were no windows, right? Windows are like open and inviting, but there's no windows here. There is marks of prolonged and sordid negligence. There's not a bell or like a door knocker, so it's not friendly, it's not inviting at all. Blistered and disdained, tramps slouching there, struck matches on the panels, so you have like these black marks from where people have struck matches there. A knife had been like carving out the moldings. And so we have this very stark contrast between this open and inviting street, and then you turn the corner and it's the opposite. It's not inviting, it's run down, worn out. And so you have these two different sides here. Mr. Enfield and the lawyer were on the other side of the by street, but when they came abreast of the entry, the former lifted up his cane and pointed. "Did you ever remark that door?" he asked, and when his companion replied in the affirmative, "It is connected in my mind," added he, "with a very odd story." "Indeed?" said Mr. Utterson with a slight change of voice. "And what was that?" "Well, it was this way," returned Mr. Enfield. "I was coming home from some place at the end of the world, about 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, and my way lay through a part of town where there was literally nothing to be seen but lamps. Here we have another example of duality, and it's a more subtle one, but this book continually works in this idea of duality throughout the story. Here we have Mr. Enfield, who's supposed to be this gentleman about town, and yet look at what time he was going home, 3 a.m. Who's out at 3 a.m.? What are you doing out at 3 a.m.? Nothing good. So then again, we have this idea of duality with this supposed gentleman, right, who has the perfect appearance and has the right friends, and yet this other side of him, he's out at 3 a.m. doing something that's probably he shouldn't be doing. Street after street, and all the folks asleep. Street after street, all lighted up as if for a procession, and all as empty as a church, till at last I got into that state of mind when a man listens and begins to long for the sight of a policeman. All at once I saw 2 figures, one a little man who was stumping along eastward at a good walk, and the other a girl of maybe 8 or 10, who was running as hard as she was able down a cross street. Well, sir, the 2 ran into one another naturally enough at the corner. And then came the horrible part of the thing, for the man trampled calmly over the child's body and left her screaming on the ground. So there was this guy and then this little girl, and they were rounding the corner, and they ran into each other, right? It happens. You can't see someone like when you're rounding the corner. They run into each other. Well, normally if you run into someone, you help them up, especially a child. But this guy didn't. He just walked over the child's body and kept going. It sounds nothing to hear, but it was hellish to see. It wasn't like a man. It was like some juggernaut. I gave him a view hello, took to my heels, collared the gentleman, and brought him back to where there was already quite a group about the screaming child. He was perfectly cool and made no resistance, but gave me one look so ugly that it brought out the sweat on me like running. The people who had turned out were the girl's own family, and pretty soon the doctor, for whom she had been sent, put in his appearance. Well, the child was not much the worse, more frightened, according to the sawbones, and there he might have supposed it would be an end to it. But there was one curious circumstance. I had taken a loathing to the gentleman at first sight. So had the child's family, which was only natural. But the doctor's case was what struck me. He was the usual cut and dry apothecary of no particular age and color, with a strong Edinburgh accent and about as emotional as a bagpipe. Well, sir, he was like the rest of us. Every time he looked at my prisoner, I saw the sawbones turn sick and white with the desire to kill him. So we have this guy that rounds the corner, runs into this little girl, doesn't stop to help her, but continues to walk over her. He's compared here to a juggernaut, which is essentially like an immovable force. Like it just keeps going, it's unstoppable, just rolling over anything in its path, rather. Enfield sees all this happen, so he runs after the guy who ran over the little girl, kind of like tackles him, drags him back over. Okay, we find out this little girl was out at 3 a.m. because her family had sent her to go grab the doctor. So the family comes out, and here we are. Enfield has this guy like collared, right? So he's holding on to him. He's not letting him go. And everyone around this guy who ran over the little girl just has this distaste in their mouth towards him. They can't quite put their finger on it, but they like loathe them. Enfield says that he loathed him. He says the doctor was sick and white with the desire to kill the guy. So there's just something about this guy that just sets everyone off. I knew what was in his mind, just as he knew what was in mine. And killing being out of the question, we did the next best. We told the man we could and would make such a scandal out of this as should make his name stink from one end of London to the other. If he had any friends or any credit, we undertook that he should lose them. And all the time, as we were pitching in red hot, we were keeping the women off him as best we could, for they were as wild as harpies. I never saw a circle of such hateful faces, and there was the man in the middle with a kind of black, sneering coolness. Frightened, too, I could see that, but carrying it off, sir, really like Satan. If you choose to make a capital out of this accident, said he, I am naturally helpless. No gentleman but wishes to avoid a scene, says he. Name your figure. Well, we screwed him up to £100 for the child's family. He would have clearly liked to stick out, but there was something about the lot of us that meant mischief, and at last he struck. So here it is. You have like basically this crowd, this mob starting to surround this guy. And so he says, look, just tell me what price you want me to pay so that this can all be over with. So they come up with £100, like $100, which back then was a good amount of money. So he's like, okay, I'll pay the girl's family £100 so that you guys will leave me alone now. The next thing was to get the money. And where do you think he carried us but to that place with the door? That's the one that was described a few pages back. Whipped out a key, went in, and presently came back with the matter of £10 in gold and a check for the balance on Coots, drawing payable to bearer and signed with a name that I can't mention, though it's one of the points of my story. But it was a name at very least well known and often printed. So he doesn't have £100 on him. So he has £10 in gold, right? Like so cash. And then he writes a check for the rest of the £100 amount. The figure was stiff, but the signature was good for more than that, if it was only genuine. I took the liberty of pointing out to my gentleman that the whole business looked apocryphal, and that a man does not, in real life, walk into a cellar door at 4 a.m. and come out of it with another man's check for close upon £100. So this check that he presents to them is not for his bank account. It's for someone else's bank account. But he was quite easy and sneering. Set your mind at rest, says he. I will stay with you till the bank opens and cash the check myself. So we all set off, the doctor and the child's father and our friend and myself, and passed the rest of the night in my chambers. And next day, when we had breakfast, went in a body to the bank. I gave in the check myself, and said I had every reason to believe it was a forgery. Not a bit of it. The check was genuine. Tut tut, said Mr. Utterson. I see you feel as I do, said Mr. Enfield. Yes, it's a bad story, for my man was a fellow that nobody could have to do with, a really horrible man, and the person that drew the check is the very pink of the propriety, celebrated too, and, what makes it worse, one of your fellows who do what they call good. Blackmail, I suppose, an honest man paying through the nose for some of the capers of his youth. So this guy whose banking account, whose check the horrible man was using to pay off the girl's money, the guy whose bank account it was is basically this pillar of society, this really great guy that you would never suspect would hang out with like the scum of the earth, like this man who ran over the little girl. So they start calling it blackmail. They're like, surely this scum of the earth guy must be blackmailing this like perfect pillar of society guy. He must have some dirt on him, because otherwise, how does he have access to his bank account? Blackmail House is what I call that place with a door in consequence, though even that, you know, is far from explaining all, he added, and with the words fell into a vein of musing. From thus he was recalled by Mr. Utterson, asking rather suddenly, "And you don't know if the drawer of the check lives there?" "A likely place, isn't it?" returned Mr. Enfield, "but I happen to have noticed his address. He lives in some square or other." "And you never asked about the place with the door?" said Mr. Utterson. "No, sir, I had a delicacy," was the reply. "I feel very strongly about putting questions. It partakes too much of the style of the Day of Judgment. You start a question, and it's like starting a stone. You sit quietly on the top of a hill, and away the stone goes, starting others. And presently some bland old bird, the last you would have thought of, is knocked on the head in his own back garden, and the family have to change their name. No, sir, I make it a rule of mine. The more it looks like Queer Street, the less I ask." So here we have Mr. Enfield, who didn't really ask any questions once the check was uh, like cashed and that the girl's family got the money. Utterson's like, "Didn't you find out more?" Enfield's like, "You know what? I don't want to, because it's kind of like this rolling stone, right? And then everything starts gathering and there's more questions, there's more problems. I just like to stay out of things, so I didn't really ask too many questions." "A very good rule, too," said the lawyer. "But I have studied the place for myself," continued Mr. Enfield. "It seems scarcely a house. There is no other door, and nobody goes in or out of it but one, once in a great while, the gentleman of my adventure. There are 3 windows looking on the court on the first floor, none below. The windows are always shut, but they're clean. And then there is a chimney which is generally smoking, so somebody must live there. And yet it's not so sure, for the buildings are so packed together about that court that it's hard to say where one ends and another begins." The pair walked on again for a while in silence, and then, "Enfield," said Mr. Utterson, "that's a good rule of yours." "Yes, I think it is," returned Enfield. "But for all that," continued the lawyer, "there's one point I want to ask. I want to ask the name of that man who walked over the child." "Well," said Mr. Enfield, "I can't see what harm it would do. It was a man of the name of Hyde." "Huh," said Mr. Utterson. "What sort of man is he to see?" "He's not easy to describe. There's something wrong with his appearance, something displeasing, something downright detestable. I never saw a man I so disliked, and yet I scarce know why. He must be deformed somewhere. He gives a strong feeling of deformity, although I couldn't specify the point. He's an extraordinary-looking man, and yet I really can name nothing out of the way. No, sir, I could make no hand of it. I can't describe him. And it's not want of memory, for I declare I can see him this moment. We find out that the name of the man who trampled the little girl, his name is Hyde. And Utterson asks Enfield, "Well, what does Mr. Hyde look like?" And Enfield says, I can't really put my finger on it. Like, he is distinctive looking, but I can't really tell you any distinctive features about him. He does say he must be deformed somewhere. He gives a strong feeling of deformity. He says, other than that, I don't really have anything to tell you about his appearance. Mr. Utterson again walked some way in silence, and obviously under a weight of consideration. "You are sure he used a key?" he inquired at last. "My dear sir," began Enfield, surprised out of himself. "Yes, I know," said Utterson. "I know it must seem strange. The fact is, if I do not ask you the name of the other party, it is because I know it already. You see, Richard, your tale has gone home. If you had been inexact in any point, you had better correct it. I think you might have warned me, returned the other with a touch of sullenness, but I had been pedantically exact, as you call it. The fellow had a key, and what's more, he has it still. I saw him use it not a week ago. Mr. Utterson sighed deeply, but said never a word, and the young man presently resumed. Here's another lesson to say nothing, he said. I am ashamed of my long tongue. Let us make a bargain never to refer to this again. With all my heart, said the lawyer. I shall shake hands on that, Richard. So there's something about Enfield's story that strikes a chord with Mr. Utterson, and we don't find out what it is in this chapter. But something about Hyde and the story about Hyde and where Hyde lives rubs Utterson the wrong way.